So, morning everyone.
Morning.
So last week we started talking about temptation, and what we said was that temptation is the experience of being persuaded or enticed to do something, especially something morally wrong or slightly dodgy. And one of the things that I'm enjoying about this short series is that this is something that we all have in common. Each and every person in this room knows exactly what it's like to feel a strange and a baffling desire to do the wrong thing, to take the unwise course of action, whether it's in the whole area of what we eat or what substances we put into our body, or sex or relationships or money, whatever. There are moments in each of our lives where we're doing the wrong thing. Just feels so good. For taking the unwise course of action is just so attractive to us. And the reason I call that attraction strange and baffling is because when you think about it, temptation really doesn't make any sense. Temptation isn't rational, it isn't logical, it's barely explainable. Think about it. Why is it that you sometimes feel a strong urge to do things that you know full well are going to hurt you and spoil your life? Why is it that you sometimes feel powerfully drawn towards a course of action that you know full well is going to jeopardize your future? Why is it that you repeatedly feel yourself being drawn towards the same things again and again and again, even though you know that every single time you did those things in the past, they had a negative effect upon your life? Doesn't make sense. So last week, when we spoke about temptation, we said that every time we're tempted, three things are at stake. We said that our future is at stake, our family is at stake, and our faith is at stake. This morning I want to go a little bit deeper into this and explore the assumptions that always operate at the back of our minds every time we're tempted to do the wrong thing. And this is subtle, so subtle that we barely notice it. For most of us, this will be the first time we've even thought about these subtleties. Alongside the obvious temptations that we deal with on a weekly basis, there is the subsidiary temptation to assume that we can do the immoral thing and we can take the unwise course of action and everything will be okay anyway. We assume that our future will not be affected. We assume that our family will always be there for us no matter what we do. And we assume that God will always forgive us and that God will always get us out of trouble. And off we go. And we do the silly things that we know we shouldn't do. And as we do them, we assume, and we assume, and we assume, and we assume. My family, they'll be there for me. God will take care of me. God will not punish me. God is a God of love. This will not affect my future. This will not damage my career or my health or my eternity. I can do this immoral thing. I can take this unwise course of action, and then when I'm done doing the thing I really know I shouldn't do, I can just go back to my life and pick up exactly where it was I left off. And I can keep doing that again and again and again, and it'll be okay. That's the assumption that operates every single time we are tempted. Let's get into the biblical text, and it'll begin to make more sense, I hope. Okay, so we're in the temptations of Jesus in the Gospel according to St. Matthew, and we've gotten as far as chapter 4 and verse 5, where we're told that the devil took Jesus to the holy city. So last week the devil and Jesus are in the desert. Now they have this Star Trek moment, don't know how it works, but they just end up in the holy city, Jerusalem. And the devil, look carefully how this is phrased. The devil had Jesus stand at the highest point of the temple. Strange phrase. He had Jesus stand. I draw your attention to that because it seems to me that this is often what our temptations are like. They're strange, they're baffling, They're unexplainable. They take us to a place. We didn't ask to go there. We didn't plan to end up in that place. But we just end up there, and suddenly we're tempted. Suddenly we're forced into a situation in life where we have to make a decision between doing the right thing or doing the wrong thing. Didn't look for it, didn't go hunting for it. It just took us there. This is often life. And here for Jesus is the highest place of the temple. So the idea in this sentence is that Jesus is at the heart of the religious establishment in Israel. He's in the temple, and he's way up on one of the towers or something, and he's looking down at the courtyard below, and he's seeing all the religious activity and all the religious people. So he looks down and he sees the chief priest and the not so chief priest and the scribes and the Pharisees and all those religious people doing all their religious things. Then in the next sentence, the devil says to Jesus, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written." And this is so smooth. Then the devil goes on to quote a bit of the Bible. You know you're in trouble when your temptations include biblical verses. There's just no way out of this. And the bit of the Bible that the devil quotes to Jesus is a bit that says something to the effect of, God the Father will never let God the Son come to any trouble. It goes like this. He, that is God the Father, will command his angels concerning you, that's Jesus, that they will lift you up in their hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone. In other words, hey Jesus, here's what it says in the Bible. Whatever you do, nothing is going to happen to you, because God has got your back. Whatever you do, you'll always be okay. There will never be negative consequences. You'll never get yourself in trouble that God will not quickly get you out of. It says it right here in the Bible, Jesus, so listen to me. And the point the devil is making here to Jesus is, Jesus, you're at the start of your career. You're about to go into Israel and give them your message. And you and I both know you're going to have a hard time impressing these people. And you and I both know that the toughest nuts that you're going to have to crack are right down there in the temple courtyard. The chief priest, the not so chief priest, the scribes, the Pharisees, all those religious people. You are never going to impress those people. Those people are never going to believe a single word that comes out of your Jesus mouth, okay? It's not going to work for you. So I've got an idea, Jesus. Just jump. No, I know it's not, just, I haven't finished. Bear with me. Just jump. Don't worry about it. Because you're the plan. For like 1,000 years of biblical history, God has been taking you to this moment. You are the plan. There is no plan B. Since Genesis 3:15, the story of the Bible has all been about you, Jesus. God's been working everything in history towards this point where you come to these people with your message and do whatever it is that you think you have to do. So I can assure you, Jesus, nothing is going to happen to you. You can assume that God will take care of you. You can presume upon God always getting you out of trouble. It's going to be okay. Just jump. Just jump. And I'll tell you exactly how it'll go, Jesus. You'll be up there and you'll jump. And everyone down below, the chief priest, the not so chief priest, the scribes, the Pharisees, all the religious people who are never going to like you, they're going to look up and they're going to say, ah, jumper. Let's get our smartphones, we'll load it on YouTube, it'll be awesome. And you'll fall and everyone will scream and it'll be great, and at the last minute you'll be like Superman and you'll land on the ground. And the chief priest and the not so chief priest and all the people who are never going to like you are going to say, who are you? And you'll take your Ray-Bans out of your top pocket and you'll put them on and you'll be like, I'm Jesus. I'm the Son of God. You got to listen to me. It's going to be awesome, Jesus. That's how you should start your career. And then they'll listen to you. Then whatever you have to say, they'll listen. It'll never end up on a cross. They'll eat every word from your mouth. This is how it should go, Jesus. Because it says right here in the Bible, I just read it to you, God will command his angels concerning you. They will lift you up in their hands. You will not strike your foot against a stone. There's angels in this deal. This is going to be a great day, Jesus. Just jump. Just jump. Now, again, we find ourselves reading the Bible, and we notice that the specifics of this particular temptation aren't all that relevant to you and me. Chances are in our life, we're never going to find ourselves on the top of a tall building being tempted to jump just in order to prove that God loves us or that God's got our back or whatever. But we are tempted, and this is so subtle, and it happens all the time, we are tempted to presume upon God and to make assumptions about what God will and will not do in response to the choices we make. So this is the temptation, for example, of launching a bunch of ideas in our family or our business, and after we launch those ideas, then turning to God and saying, God, you've got my back in this, right? You're with me in this, right? It says in the Bible, you want me to prosper, you want me to do well, so come on, where are you? Or I'm going to take this substance, and I know it's not a very good idea, I know it's not very clever, but it says right here in the Bible that you love me, and that you've got good plans for my life, so you've got my back on this one, right? Or I'm going to invite this guy over to my apartment, and I know how the night's going to go, and I know it's not a very smart idea, and I realize it's probably the wrong idea, but it says in the Bible, you've got good plans for me, God. And you know those plans are not going to involve harm in my life or damage in my life. And then we think God's up in heaven going, oh damn, you found that verse. You got me. You're right, go ahead, do whatever you want to do. It'll all work out. Or, God, I'm tempted to do this thing and I know it's wrong, but I know I shouldn't, but I'm going to do it anyway. But it's going to be okay because it says right here in the Bible that you're faithful, that you're going to forgive my sins and all that and all that. We behave this way all the time. In our temptations, we operate on the assumption that it's okay for us to do Y. Because God will always do X. It's okay for us to do this because God is obliged to do this. It's like the young lady who says, I know he's a jerk. And I know he's a really bad marriage partner. And I know everyone in my life is telling me this. But I'm going to marry him anyway. And then once we're married, I'm going to pray that he'll change. Let me know how that goes. Right? It's like the student who didn't study and on the morning of the exam then suddenly gets religious. And prays. God, I didn't study, but it says in your word that you've got good plans for me. You don't want me to fail, do you, God? You don't want my life to go badly. You don't want this all to end up in dust. It says right here in your word, you've got good plans for my life. So God, I'm calling in the cards. Help me out with this exam. In church world, we have a terminology for this. We call it stepping out in faith. I'm just going to step out in faith and trust God. When someone says that, what they usually mean is, this is a really bad idea. It's not well researched. It defies common sense. It's unwise. It probably won't work. But I'll use the faith word, and that'll kind of make it all okay. Because it says right here in the Bible that God will provide for me. It says right here in the Bible that God is kind and merciful and that God forgives and that He works all things out for the good of those who love Him, or whatever it says in the Bible. And that's not faith, that's presumption. That's assuming that God will always and that God will never. And sometimes I imagine that God's up there in heaven listening to our desperate prayers, and like there we are on the morning of the exam praying, and God is up there in heaven saying, well, I'm glad that you're praying to me about this, but should we not have had a conversation about this before you chose not to study? Would that not have made more sense? And, I'm glad you're praying about, you want me to change your husband or whatever. I don't think I do that, but should we not have had this conversation before you decided to marry the idiot in the first place? Would that not have made more sense? Would that not have been more rational? Because here we are praying about the trouble that you are in, praying about you facing the consequences of your own actions and your own decisions. And you want me to kind of change all that. I'm God, I'm not a genie in a bottle. I don't do your bidding. I'm not a get out of jail card. Yes, it says in the Bible, I'm rich in grace and mercy and kind and loving and forgiving and all those things. But before I am those things, I'm God. And you don't play me. You don't get to manipulate me. You don't read things in my word and then use those things against me and assume and presume and all that. That's not how life works. So the temptation that Jesus faces is as subtle as the ones we face on a daily basis. It's a subtle conversation that happens in our own head, and usually we lose. Jesus, you can jump, because you can assume that in your case, actions will not lead to consequences. You can assume that all of the rules of life do not apply to you. You can assume that you will be an exception to the rule. And then, just like he did last week, Jesus reaches back into what was his Bible, the Old Testament, to a time when Israel faced a similar temptation to the one he is facing now. I'll just read you the story and then we'll look at how Jesus handles it. So last week I reminded you that for 400 years or so, the people of Israel were slaves in Egypt. And then God sent baby Moses to deliver them. And they left Egypt and they wandered in the desert for 40 years or so. And during those wanderings, God gave them bread every day. We spoke about that last week. And there's one story in the Old Testament. The people of Israel in their wanderings come to a place called the Desert of Sin. It sounds really cool, right? So I think I've been to that city, actually. 5 times. And counting. So they come to this place called the Desert of Sin, which in the Old Testament isn't as exciting as it sounds. It's just a desert. And as the name suggests, in the desert there is no water. And there's a lot of people there, so they need a lot of water. And so they come to Moses one day with their prayers. And as they come, they have 2 options. Option number 1 would be for them to say, okay, let's do the math. In recent history, we have experienced God miraculously delivering us from Egypt. We saw what he did. We lived the story. We saw the plagues. We saw the whole Red Sea parting thing. Every morning we eat the bread from heaven. So we have this tangible experience, an experience you and I don't have, of God actually coming through in a miraculous way on a daily basis. So based on that, we can trust God for water. That would be one option. Option number 2 would be to taunt God. It would be to go to God with a cheeky presumption and say, it says in the Bible that you're good. Well, if you're good, how come we've got no water? If you're good, how come things are going so badly for us? Are you really good? Come on, come on, come on, come on, come on, come on. And that latter option was the option they went for. And so in the story of Exodus, it says that they quarreled with Moses and said, give us water to drink. Moses said, why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to the test? Keyword, test. But the people were thirsty for water there, fair enough. And they grumbled against Moses and said, why did you bring us up out of Egypt to make us and our children die of thirst? So you see what's going on there? They're basically taunting God, reminding him of the things that they have taken for granted. I thought you were good. I thought you could be trusted. We were lied to. You're not who we thought we were. Taunt, taunt, taunt. So that's what happened, and God ended up giving them the water anyway. Next sentence. Moses called the place Massah. The word Massah means to test. And Meribah. The word Meribah means to argue. Because the Israelites quarreled and tested the Lord, saying, is the Lord among us or not? Here I am in life. facing the consequences of actions, and God's not here. Where is He? Why isn't God coming through for me? Why isn't God fixing this? Now that's the story in the book of Exodus. That's like a commentary of what happened. Then there's another book in the Bible where Moses basically gives a speech after they get to the promised land. It's a speech that reminds them of their history. So they wander in the desert for 40 years, they live all these strange experiences, then they get to where they're going, and Moses gives them this speech. Listen to what Moses has to say about the episode with the water in the desert of Sin. Moses says to the people, "Do not test the Lord. Don't do it. Don't give in to the temptation to force God's hand on any issue. Don't get yourself into a situation where you're disobedient to what God has clearly said in the Bible, and then once you're facing the consequences of that disobedience, then say to God, 'Oh God, I thought you loved me. I thought you delivered me. I thought you were good. I thought you were kind. I thought you were forgiving.' Don't do it. Don't test God. Don't make assumptions about what God will do and what God will never do. Yes, He's rich in grace and mercy. Yes, He loves you more than you'll ever know. Yes, He's a deliverer, but He's also God. And it's not a mandatory requirement for Him to do things for you. It's a mandatory requirement for you to do the things He said." And so Moses goes on and he says, "Don't test the Lord your God, but be sure to keep the commands the Lord your God has given you, and the decrees and all that stuff. Do what is right. Do what is good, so that it may go well with you." Translation: make good choices in life, and those good choices will lead to good consequences. General rule. There are exceptions to that rule. Many of us are living examples of that. But the general rule still applies. Good choices lead to good consequences. So when Jesus is at the top of the building and Satan is saying, "Jump, it'll be a great way to start your career, it'll press everyone down below. Don't worry about going splat on the ground, because it says in the Bible that God will never let that happen to you. He will command His angels, they will do all that thing." When Satan says that to Jesus, Jesus reaches back into the Old Testament and immediately understands that what Satan is trying to do is get Jesus to make assumptions about how life works and about what God will and won't do. And he knows that that's wrong. And so he quotes the Bible to Satan. He says, "It is written in the Bible, do not test God. Do not make assumptions about how He works, about how life works, about actions and consequences. Do not make assumptions." I think I said at the beginning, and I'll come back to that now, I think our temptations are not really rational. They are real. Nietzsche, in the late 19th century, wrote an important book called Die Fröhliche Wissenschaft. It was in that book that he famously said that God is dead. So what Nietzsche said was basically, there is no God, there is no devil, there is no heaven, there is no hell, there is no religion. It's all meaningless. And so therefore, and I quote, the quote will be on the screen, because there is no God and there is no devil, because there is no heaven, because there is no hell, what that means is one's life should be the sole consideration for how one should act. In other words, what we're all supposed to be is selfish. And the way to live is to make decisions and choices based solely upon our own self-interest all the time. And I think that the mere fact that temptation exists as a phenomenon at all proves that what Nietzsche said about God is not true. I think that we often get down about temptation, and we misunderstand what it says about what we're like as people. I think that temptation says something interesting about the existence of God in general, and about our faith in particular. Because when you think about it, temptation is the opposite of selfishness. If we were always looking out for our own self-interest, then we would not even be thinking about doing some of the things that we sometimes think about doing. Because we know enough to know that those things will harm us. We know enough to know that those things will have a negative effect upon our lives and maybe even ruin us completely. So I don't think that temptation is about selfishness. I think it's closer to the truth to say that temptation is about an inexplainable self-destruction. And yet in our Christian journey, sometimes we spiritualize this value of Nietzsche's. And so we take as our starting point our own lives and our own needs and our own desires. And in our self-destructive moments, let's call temptation for what it is, these things replace logic and reason. And they become our sole criteria by which we evaluate how we should and should not act. So there we are, we're saying to ourselves, should I do this thing? I know it's wrong, I do. But I've been working hard lately. And I'm kind of stressed. And in this hard-working, stressed moment, the sole criteria by which I evaluate my actions is my own needs. Therefore, I'll do it. Should I take a few shortcuts on this deal? I know it's wrong. I know that I should disclose all the information, but I need the money. And my needs are the sole criteria with which I evaluate my actions. Therefore, I will do whatever it takes to get this done. You see this? In our lives, in our temptations, in our self-destructive moments, our needs often become the sole criteria which determine how we should and should not act. And here's what we say in the subtext of our temptation. I know it's the wrong thing to do. I know it's the unwise course of action, but I'm going to do it anyway. And as I do it, I'm going to assume that when I've done it, God will be okay with me. I'm going to assume that God will forgive me. I'm going to assume that my preferred future for myself and for my family and for my faith will be unaffected by what I'm about to do. Because God's job is to bail me out. I am a living example that the rules of life and the universe don't apply to me. I am an exception. That's how it always works. Assume, assume, assume. Don't assume. Don't assume, first of all, that your future will be unaffected by what you do. The world is full of people whose present reality is damaged because of unwise decisions they made in the past. You and I have no right to assume that things will be any different for us. Decisions have consequences. They just do, whether we are religious or not. Secondly, don't assume that your family will always be there for you. Some of the self-destructive things that we are drawn to have a profound effect upon those who are closest to us. And we have no right to assume that they will be there for us again and again and again. Maybe they will, maybe they won't, who knows. But don't assume that they will. And finally, don't assume that it's God's job to cooperate with you. God isn't your genie in a bottle. It's your job, biblically, to cooperate with God and to do what He says and to live the way He has asked. And if you choose not to, don't assume that the consequences won't apply to you, whatever they are. I think the last thing, and someone mentioned this in the question time last week, the last thing that we do in our temptations, in our self-destructive desires, the last thing we do is think. The last thing we do is just to step back from the situation and give ourselves a moment and say, where's this going to lead? If I do this, where's it going to end? What effect is it going to have? That's the last thing we do, when it ought to be the first thing we do. And so this week, as we face those things, and this week we will face things. I'll guarantee you that. If you don't face things, you're not alive. You're not human. So as we face things this week, let's give ourselves that moment. Let's give ourselves that empowering pause where we stop and think. and remind ourselves in that moment that we have no right to assume anything about life other than actions have consequences. There may be exceptions to that rule. We have no right to assume those exceptions will apply to us. That kind of sucks. I think. Any questions on any of... If Jesus succeeds in his mission, then Satan knows he's screwed. Now, Satan seems to know enough to know that he can't get Jesus to just give up on his mission altogether. And so he comes at it very subtly. And this is often the case in our temptations too. Often we're tempted to do the right thing in the wrong way. And I think it's important to remember in our temptations that somewhere in all of our temptations there is a legitimate need. All of our temptations say something about legitimate, God-given, decent, proper human needs that we have that we should not be ashamed of and we should not feel dirty about or embarrassed about. I think that's true for all of our temptations. Somewhere in there is something good, something right and proper. But temptation is all about trying to meet those proper needs in an improper way. And that's what Satan's trying to do to Jesus here. Jesus has a need to get the job done, to get his message across. There's a right way of doing that, and there's a wrong way of doing that. So let's use business as another example. I have a need in business to make a sale. There's a right way of making that sale, there's a wrong way of making that sale. Let's use sexual intimacy as another example. I have a need for sexual intimacy in life. There's a right way of meeting that need, there's a wrong way of meeting that need. Let's use stress relief as another example. Maybe that's the same as the other example. Anyway. I have a need to just escape from the very, very hard work that I do every day and have fun. That is a legitimate need. It's a God-given need. But there's a right way to meet that need, and there's a wrong way to meet that need. In our temptations, this is the dynamic that always, always exists. And typically we're lazy. We want the shortcut. We always think temptation is about right here, right now. We forget that it isn't. There's longer term effects to it.
For help if you're willing.
But yes, good, thank you. But there's a huge difference from a Christian perspective of saying, between saying, God, I've screwed up. You know, can you bail me out here? That's perfectly legitimate and proper and Christian, and we all, have those times where we say, God, I've screwed up, can you help me? There's a difference. That's Christian and proper. But what's unchristian and improper is to say, God, I'm about to screw up on purpose, because I know for the next hour it's going to be a great thing, or it's going to get me through this deal or whatever. And then after I've screwed up on purpose, I'm going to come to you and kind of get the whole thing unscrewed. I think that probably describes all of our life there. And that's probably a great prayer. God, get this thing unscrewed, please. It's normal in our Christian life to get to a place where we realize we need help and forgiveness and all that. And it's right to turn to God to that. But where Jesus is coming from in this story is it's wrong to turn to God ahead of time and say, I'm about to do something wrong. Please make it okay. And we all do that too, right? Don't we? Think first, do later. Always a good idea. Always a good idea. Most of the trouble we get ourselves into is because we think after we do. And that's a habit we need to get out of. Good point. Okay, let's pray then. Let's go. Our Father in heaven, we know that this week we're going to have to make decisions. We're going to be faced with choices, some little, some big. And we ask that that ahead of those choices you will give us wisdom and courage and help to do the right thing. And we ask for that courage and wisdom and help because honestly, sometimes we don't want to do the right thing. Sometimes we want to do the wrong thing. And in our wrongness, we want to assume upon you. And we want to escape from consequences and all that. So, we don't want to be silly about this, our Father, and we ask that ahead of time you will help us to do the right thing. We ask this in Christ's name.